No, no.
All right, so welcome to our lovely panel. This panel is collaboration techniques for game designers and artists. We're basically going to be going over different methods that we can use, different techniques that game developers and artists use together to create something really cool. And just the basic questions will be asked to these guys, and then we'll open it up at the end, about 15 minutes till it's over, for you guys to ask them questions as well. So we can get started with introductions. You guys can introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm at Canei. I'm creative and art director for Impact Games on Hanukkah Soul of the Samurai, and I'm a technical artist at Hi-Res Studios.
Hi, I'm Brandon Moulton. I'm an animator at AGS.
Hi, I am Annick Huber, and I'm the art director at Ker-Chunk Games.
And I'm Leah Knighton. I am the co-founder and narrative director at Ker-Chunk Games. So yeah, good stuff. All right. So I'll open this up with a pretty basic question to start with. How do you keep all employees moving in the same direction on a project? How often do you have to reevaluate your direction and change things up? And that's a question for all of you guys.
So it's a big question. First, I guess project management, your solution for it, whether you use like a Trello or one of those. I know that's one of the topics later, but you just need some form of documentation so your team knows the overall direction. Like for Hanukkah, we do quarterly schedules. So we will do a 3-month goal, and I want the whole team to understand the high level goal. Like this quarter, we want combat to be much more polished, or it's a goal that they can understand why the tasks exist. So it's not like arbitrary, like I'll throw you one task at a time. You don't really know why. You're just like, oh, okay, I'm doing the task. But I want them to understand the whole breadth of the project, so they can rally behind the goal, and it makes the tasks, it gives them context, I guess.
Good answer.
Yeah, the art director usually has a pretty firm direction he wants to go in. Normally, the concept art, everyone sticks to that and follows the storyboards. But it's mostly the art director making decisions and kind of driving the entire force.
At Ker-Chunk Games, we're a very small company. We're very few people, so mostly it's pretty organic, and we keep it more in a communication-based and feedback. But overall, we've also still started creating some design docs that establish the guidelines of what each element is supposed to look like, so that when other people go and modify the assets, they know what they're supposed to do with each asset. Instead of people putting in their own creative styles, we together come up with a general style for the project, and we all stick to it.
Cool. Okay. All right, so how do you prevent different groups from becoming siloed? It's a big issue in the industry, I know.
I think you can separate that into two parts. The studio life is very different from freelance, and I feel like when you're working on freelance stuff, it's much easier to become disconnected. So communication, constant emails, and trying to get more and more feedback. It's almost the same in studio. Everyone's right there, so you just get to walk over and talk to people. So it's a little bit easier.
I find it important for people to have multidisciplinary skills, so to understand what other teams are up to and what their jobs are, so that when creating your work, you also can think one step ahead as to how can I best help the next person that's in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think just constant communication. My team's remote, so there's people like in Canada and other time zones, and we do a weekly Google Hangout meeting where everyone's there, and we kind of do a stand-up style, like I wish we could do in person. And then it's just constantly keeping up on Asana and chats, and I'll ping people every once in a while, just like, hey, how's it going, just to make sure. Because with a remote team and an unfunded team, it's easy to get off the rails, because life gets in the way fast, and it's easy to make excuses like, well, I'm not getting paid for this, so.
And you're all working on your own stuff, so
yeah.
Communication key, definitely. That's good. Cool. Anything else to add to that? Okay. Now this is more of an art-based question. I know how important it is to create a game that's visually appealing. I mean, me and Annick work on Ker-Chunk together, so we've dealt with this as well. How do you keep consistency with working with different art styles? have you experienced conflict with this, and how did you resolve it?
So when we didn't really have conflict when it came to art styles, but we just naturally don't draw
We're
the
just
same
really
way.
good.
But whenever the way we ended up coming up with an art style that worked with the both of us was, instead of when we first were designing the look of our game, instead of dividing the work, it's like you do this, you do that, we were constantly passing the artwork back and forth, and not sometimes working on the same files, but sometimes just taking, for example, a character and redrawing it our own way, so that in the end, what we ended up with ended up being a combination of our art styles rather than just someone's one art style that everyone else follows.
And we threw around different ideas, like she was saying, and just stayed really close connection, collaborated really well, did a lot of sketches until we found the art style that was good.
For us, the game design documents and concept art, it's usually the lead artists who kind of make sure everyone's on track and decide, okay, this doesn't quite fit, change this and that, and then the art director comes in, and so there's little milestones and pieces of the puzzle that are constantly being fixed and adjusted to go in that one direction.
Yeah, I think for us it was a process over many years, because like when the game started, Hanako, it was a college project, so we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't know what we were doing at the time. And there's just many evolutions that we kind of went through. It was defined for a while, and I think it's knowing your game, knowing your market. Like, is it single player or multiplayer? There's like single player lends itself to more storytelling, like through the art, whereas multiplayer is more like gameplay driven. So it sets restrictions and different requirements. And then you kind of decide like what's featured in your game. If it's a character-centric game, then you're going to probably put more resources into the characters. You want them to stand out in environments, then play more of a supporting role. Or if it's like an exploration game, then your environments become more focused, and that determines everything, like color schemes and kind of what the visual treatment is. If you're going with like a comic style, or like mobile games don't have the resources that like a AAA game has, you're not going to have the super realistic. Well, now cell phones are basically like amazing laptops, so maybe you can now, but previously your platform and your minimum specs and all of that kind of determine where you can go. And then you just kind of have style guides and design documents, sample textures or sample assets. They're like, this is the bar. You have your hero assets and work your way down to rocks. Here's kind of how they should be treated, and you kind of make it a science.
Mood boards, just storyboards, just everything. The more you can plan up front to keep everybody at the same page, the better.
Especially if you have a bigger team.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Because you need to just make sure everyone's on the same page and doing mood boards and like.
Also have to think about how the people working on games are not always the same people from the beginning to the
That's
end.
True.
Very often there'll be people coming in, coming out, and suddenly you'll end up with a very different team than you started with. And somehow they need to know what the original vision was.
Especially like colors. It goes from the exact colors to what the characters look like in their turnarounds. There's a lot that goes into it, just keeping it consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Annick have done a pretty good job with that. We take, especially like if we're doing new environments, we'll even take the character into the engine and put it on top, or just do a mock-up in like Photoshop and see what it looks like in that environment. And then we'll test it on phone, test it on different devices, and that helps a lot.
Can I ask you guys a question about that?
Yeah.
So with team turnovers, it's something we deal with too. Do you find that as an art director, you have to go through unification passes? Like you have to take new people's work and kind of make adjustments to it so it fits kind of along while you're bringing them in, while you're training them up?
Well, to be fair, at Ker-Chunk Games, we haven't had much employees other than ourselves. So we haven't had to deal with people's different art styles and having to bring anyone up to speed. We've mostly had contractors doing sound or other things. As far as art, we're pretty set with just our founding team. So we haven't really dealt with that.
Okay.
I've dealt with that in freelance. The people you're dealing with are, they're not the same all the time, and you just kind of have to be personable and just kind of dig out those old concepts and make sure that everyone's on the same page. And having more meetings about it help a lot. constant feedback.
Yeah, it's important. And showing it to people too.
Yeah.
Showing it off to people who on unbiased opinions. I mean, even some that are like biased relatives and whatnot. Just showing it around, getting feedback. It's important, especially like from people outside your team. Okay. Let's see. Okay, what is your pipeline for artists sending deliverables to developers for when you do implementation into the game engine? Good.
For us, we have a central program called Alien Brain, and we have our folder structures, and everyone knows, okay, in the testing folder we put these here and there and there, and so it's very structured and organized, and so you say, okay, we've updated this asset, everybody knows where it is. We work on a lot of the same games over and over and over, so everyone's pretty familiar, but when you're working on something completely new and different, those file structures become real important because people can get lost in your files and have no idea what's the most updated asset. So it's just, again, communication and talking with your programmer. Hopefully everything comes out all right.
Yeah, I think we use Asana for project management. Like Trello, all of them have it. You can attach files to a task or to an issue, whatever the thing is. And for us, like I do all the implementation, so I'm kind of just like the centerpiece where everyone sends their work and I put it in the engine. Just probably shouldn't because I do the art too, but you have to work with what you have.
Wear a lot of hats.
You have a small team. The smaller the team, the more hats you have to wear, and the more you have to do is like do some art, and then there's animation sitting on Asana in a folder. And it's like, all right, I need to set nights aside for tech art, I call it, and do all the implementation.
And at Ker-Chunk, we mostly just have a big Dropbox folder that we all use, and we all know the file structure. And we usually just drop the files in Dropbox, and the developer comes in and actually implements them in the engine. But in my previous experience at a bigger company, there was a bit more problems with who's working on which file. How do we make sure that we're not opening the same file? So what we were using over there was something called Subversion, which allows someone to check out the file so other people can't use it while it's checked out. And then when you're done with it, you check it back in, and then it becomes available to everyone. And also version control, so you can always go back and, someone made a change that should not have been made, and we could always go back to the previous version.
Cool. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm like losing my voice. Okay. So now we can move on to kind of questions about what tools that you use in the industry and what's the best to use for your team. What communication tools are commonly used within your business? Do you use Skype, Trello, Division, Git, Slack? I know you've mentioned some of these as you were talking, but could you kind of expand on that?
At Ker-Chunk, we mostly use Slack for communication. So again, for a small team, I found Slack works really well because there's not too much chatting to always keep up with. And then we use Trello for assignment tasks and project management.
We have a couple different things at AGS. We have version 1, which is our tasks and how we're keeping track of everyone and what they're doing. And then we have Link, which is, I think it's Skype now, which is just talking person to person, and then of course email. But those are our main resources.
We use Perforce for version control because it plugs straight into Unreal, so you can manage your files like straight from the content browser, and you don't have to keep going back and forth between programs. And Asana for project management and task tracking and all of that. Just use Google Hangouts. We always have a web tab for Gmail anyway, so we'll just Google Hangouts and just open a meeting for that. And we've started using Discord a lot for voice checks. We're doing internal testing and getting, test group people and the devs. I think Google Hangouts is like a 10-person limit. So if there's a larger test, getting, 20 people or whatever in a voice chat so you can manage and give instructions or whatnot.
Cool. All right. How have you learned to deal with communication gap that generally exists between asset artists and programmers? Because I know you guys are from completely different worlds. Sometimes it translates over.
I just get up and go talk to him.
I told you can't use that as your answer.
Okay. In freelance, it's a lot more difficult. It's okay. I need to go talk to this programmer. I hope I explained everything right. And the worst part is just waiting to see what they'll do, if they'll actually implement it the way you kind of explained. But if you don't talk to them, it's going to be a lot worse.
Yeah, first you have to go to Home Depot and get a ladder, and you put it up on the wall between the two of you, and you climb over. No, for real though. Just communication and having meetings at the right times. You know, when you're designing mechanics and you have your design meetings, usually you want your gameplay programmer, your designer, and then project manager in there so you can discuss the logistics, and they understand what the artist's tasks are going to be that are requirements for that. So if there's an animation set that needs code support, like an ability that has special treatment, just letting the programmer know. And really, our programmers, they watch Perforce so closely, and there's just a log of what everyone's submitting and descriptions, and they know oh, the animation set just got submitted, and then I'll see a submission an hour later, hey, it's done. It's yay, don't even have to do anything.
I think something that's really worth doing for the artists that I personally don't do nearly enough is always constantly checking the build of the game and being up to date as to which assets are currently implemented, which ones are in the backlog, and making sure that they look right. So just making sure that no communication gaps have been made between the artists and the developers as far as implementation, because sometimes maybe you'll deliver an asset and eventually falls to the cracks. It gets forgotten. No one puts it in, and no one notices until you, the artist who actually made it, goes in and is like, "Hey, I thought I changed that," and the developer is like, "Oh yeah, I didn't know that."
It never hurts to send an email just telling them, seeing people on there saying, "Hey, this has been updated," so everyone knows.
Mm-hmm. All right. Many startups and small companies rely on remote employees due to the lack of a traditional office space. I know a lot of us have worked virtually at least some point in our career. Do you have any suggestions to help improve the remote communication there?
Respond to emails fast. The turnaround between getting another freelance job or continuing the freelance job you have, there's a lot on your communication, and if you respond to your email within an hour, you're more likely to keep the job, and everything will be much better. Trust me.
Yeah, I second that. Response rate's important, and especially remote teams, because and if you're not paying them also, it's so easy for them to fall off the rails that it's not that I'm sitting there hounding my team all the time, dude, where's the work? Come on. But more of when they need something, it's your job as an art director or a lead to just keep the pipe empty. You have to bulldoze through obstacles that come up, and it's the faster you can get them direction, the faster they can address it, even if they're not going to do it right then, but at least they know oh, these are the new requirements. Okay, I'm not confused now, because a confused artist is an artist not doing work usually. Mm-hmm. They're just trying to figure it out in their head first.
Yeah, I think availability of communication is important, because that's what you're missing on, is the ability of getting up and going to someone and being like, "Hey, I need this answer now." So people need to be pretty available.
And also, no vague answers "Oh yeah, that's awesome." No, if I send you an email, I'm kind of looking for a little bit more than that.
It needs more
more input.
Yeah. Yeah. Be more exact with your words.
Yes. I hate that. Okay.
Onomatopoeia is not an answer to an art director. It's this needs more.
All right. Well, this leads us to. Do you have any examples of massive or even small communication failures that you've seen?
Yeah, a lot, because it's been 8-year project for some people. Yeah. So it's a learning process. There's been a ton of times where usually it's animation. Animator will do something, and I'm like, what? Where were this doesn't follow the design at all.
That sounds right. Yeah.
It's what? Why is he going forward when he's supposed to be working or whatever the thing is? And it's just usually it's because the design was too vague, like you said. We mentioned it's an ultimate ability. He has 6 attacks, and that's about it. And they're like, well, we don't know. Is he working in space? Is he going forward? Is he flipping? What's the character doing? And we had to get more detailed. It had to be very, very specific. Like, he takes a step forward these many units, he swings left to right, and then he steps back 4 more steps. And it's just being more clear and concise, and including them in design meetings too, when characters are involved. Like before I mentioned, is like art director and programmer, but like sometimes the animator needs to be there to know.
Yeah.
Because then they interpret the design a certain way.
Also, sometimes you could be talking with someone and you're not actually speaking the same language. You're using the same words, but they mean something completely different to you. And yeah, along the same lines, it's just I've actually had a couple freelance jobs that have gone awry. And I know you guys use Discord, but Discord is not the way to keep track of things. So like a giant long feed is not a great way to just read through the feed. No, I don't want to do that.
Email threads can get messy too.
Email threads can get messy.
But
yes.
there's an extent
there
where
needs to
you're
be
like-
a certain place that says, okay, these are what's changed, these are what's updated, these are the new directions. So clear and concise, so everyone knows where to go look.
Yeah, I would say it's when people talk, when within a team, people come with decisions and don't involve or notify a third party that is also concerned by that problem. It's generally when problems occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for Ker-Chunk, I know we've had some issues with like file sizes and stuff like that being not translating well, and we've messed up there. But for the most part, small teams easier to communicate. So
Yeah,
hadn't been as
the bigger the
detrimental.
team, the more communication becomes important,
And as
the bigger
Brandon-
the chances of things falling apart.
Right. And as Brandon said, if you speak in 2 different languages, if you don't understand what your teammate is saying, you need to tell them, because a lot of people they'll try to act like they know, and they're trying to like be, I don't know, don't want to look dumb, and no, be straightforward. If you don't understand, it's gonna set it back. So get them to explain it to you in a way that you.
And always kind of repeat it to the person
Yes.
in a different phrase, a different way, just to make sure you all know what you're talking about. Because, we've been, like I said, we've been using the same words, but they mean something completely different to me as an animator than they do to somebody else, the client.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll get into kind of asset organizational structure questions. What file organization pitfall do you commonly see? What would you do to give people good advice to avoid that or avoid them?
Naming conventions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, finish 1, finish 001, finish 002, actually finished.
Don't name it.
Don't do that.
Good version, yeah.
final version 35.
I've named files really aggressive things before, like fuck my life and stuff like that. But you can't send that to your team.
Check what you named your files before sending them back to your client.
Especially if
yeah.
you're working with your client.
Yeah. But also, when you don't notify people things that, like, say I'm waiting on an asset to be done, and they finished it, like a week ago. Well, no one told me, and I can see what's been checked out, what's checked in, but I don't really go and look through it all the time. So, along the same lines, if it's okay, this is ready. Oh, but you still have this checked out. Just remember to check it in and make sure that everything's up to date, and you're not preventing me from working.
I think having a sound logic for naming conventions, making sure, prefixes and suffixes, and that everyone buys in and everyone follows those, having docs easily accessible, and they're simple for everyone to interpret.
Yeah.
So it's not like some crazy 20-page doc of here's the naming conventions for every possibility. It's like, no, here's the general rules for textures and 3D models and animation files and whatnot. And really, you can just never have too many folders. I mean, I guess there's probably a limit, but having just master folders with 50 things, and it's nice to have, here's your 3D Max or your Maya folder for your source file, here's your texture folder, here's your animation folder, and here's your export folder where your finished animations go, so someone can look at the source file if they want within, let's say it's attacks, or this character's attacks is the master folder, and in there, if I want to look at the Maya file to make sure a certain frame's right, okay, but then if I want the export to implement, then it's in the export folder.
I've also seen it where I've named something, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to save it out, but I changed the name, maybe capitalized. Programmers hate that. Don't change the name, the spelling, the capitalizations, anything. So once it's a name, make it stay that name.
Also, no spaces in file
No
names.
spaces, underscores. They break render farms.
All right. How do you keep track of file revisions and ensure that everyone is working on the current build? I know we've kind of talked about the build a little bit, but if you want to add more to that.
I think just the team members that don't need source control and they don't need Unreal, I just keep them out of it. I just don't give them access to Perforce. They don't need it. They can just filter files into either the programmer or whoever, and then everyone that needs the engine has it, and it's just automatic. They just look at track Perforce or just send a chat like, hey, I submitted a ton of stuff. Make sure you get latest or it'll break the build.
Yeah. I mean, most of the programs can see what's been updated, but artists don't generally check what's been updated. So, like I said, sending an email is great. When you say, oh, okay, I've updated the background. Could you please go and get the latest? It takes like 3 minutes.
I think a lot of it is making sure that other people are aware of where the laters, like whenever we finish something, notify someone of which one's the exact finished file, and the people who need it afterwards, where to find the last thing. And also, again, naming conventions, make it clear by the file structure and the name which one is the last file without people constantly having to ask and communicate.
Okay, well, I know we didn't ask too many art-based questions, so if you guys want to add to any of this, especially related to art.
So I think I'm one of the only artists in the panel.
Oh no, we're all
Annick's
artists.
an artist.
Oh, okay. All right. My bad. Yeah, it's being an artist is you have to kind of follow the pack sometimes and not get too hurt when they kill your babies. Just like, oh,
You can't take it personally.
yeah, you can't take it personally. Like,
No.
oh, I don't like this. Okay, well, it's not like he doesn't like me as a person. It's just, he doesn't
I've
like
had
this one
people
thing.
really struggle with that. Like, I've talked to people in the industry.
It's
who
hard. It's
are-
hard
who
at
get
first.
upset. Yeah, but I mean, you just gotta take it. It's the business. You have to do what's right for the business, and
Yeah.
it's not personal. It's not your art.
Yeah,
but-
you're changing things for the good of the game or
Right.
for the good of the project or whatever.
and that
it
helps
is.
you grow too, because you throw it out and you do it again.
You may not agree with it all the time,
Right. Yeah.
but it's better everyone's working together towards one goal than it is for you to keep your baby and just fight with the other teammates to keep what you want.
Yeah, personal attachment to work is kind of an ongoing struggle. Like when you're managing teammates, and then like as an artist, it's just like anything. If you want to, I feel like if you want to be truly great at something, if you like study the people that are truly great at things, usually it's the people that are like the most humble about it, and also the most self-critical and self-aware, and they understand that it's like I do not equal my work. Like you're represented by your work, but also I think advice I give a lot of people when they ask about art stuff is pretend when you're looking at your own work when it's done, pretend it's someone you don't like who did that art. Then it's really easy to be unbiased and be really maybe even overly critical depending on the requirements. It's nice if you can train yourself to look at your own art and be like, nah. But then you get into that artist dilemma where it's there's that meme that's like, this is good, this is crap, I am crap, this is amazing.
Cycle.
Yeah,
And,
you like your work best when you just finish it, and
And
you
then
like
you
it
hate
least
it.
the next day.
And always talking to the person down the pipeline to you and always getting feedback like, hey, is this going to work for you? If this is a sound guy, like, oh, yeah, I think you need to make this a little bit more exaggerated. I'm like, okay. But you don't want to hold up people. Whatever you do is like, you got to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to let it go and go on to the next person.
And on the other end of that, don't be afraid to give feedback, even like harsh feedback to
Yeah.
I mean, don't be mean, but but give feedback when it's needed.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with personally. It's also using your eye and critiquing other people's work, even not being afraid of hurting other people's feelings, and constantly making sure that it's for the betterment of the project is the end goal. But at the same time, you want to be someone that's easy to work with too.
Yeah. Like I said, yeah, you don't want to fight with your teammates. Just kind of try to help each other and let it go.
Yeah, you have to get to know your team well and know their personalities and know like your communication style can't be the same for every person on your team. You have to learn their quirks and things that you can tell like kind of what their buttons are, what you can see in body language if it's like a video meeting or even just vocal tones. You just have to study that stuff and learn that you can tell when someone's starting to get a little like when you're giving them feedback, and then you kind of adapt and you can go back like, all right, look, the old like compliment sandwich technique where you're like, all right, they need some positive reinforcement, but they need to know that it doesn't follow requirements either. And sometimes you just have to preempt or add subnotes to your words and just be like, look, I'm reminding you that my intent here is to make your work better, to make the project look better. It's not, I don't hate you, I'm not mad at you, your work's great, but these things need to improve.
But start over.
Throw it away.
All gone. Yeah, and I mean, the programmers will also give you like feedback on that if they need something like resized or redone. I've had to do that as well. And it's just something you have to get used to. I've done a lot of animations that weren't used because we had to scope down. You can't take it personally, like
Scope creep.
We should talk about scope.
yeah, we could totally talk about scope.
So it's super easy, especially like if you're in school or any time, to get super ambitious with your projects. You have all these lofty ideas, and it's super easy to write a design document that has infinite ideas. Just, I'm gonna make the next awesome game, and you have to know what your team's capable of and how long things take and scope back. Like I remember the college version of Hanako is like a 70-page design document that's like absurdly, there's just so much content that it would take a giant AAA studio to make. Then like versus the design document now, it's like a nice, reasonable, like half as much content, a third as much like environments, and it's even though everyone on the team's more talented, the scope of the project matches the skill sets and it matches the availability of everyone, whereas in college it's like, let's have like 20 characters and 50 maps and it's going to be awesome. It's like you just have to manage that well and understand it's okay to scope down. It's not going to, you can always add later. DLCs are real common. Just DLC everything in there.
I mean, sometimes people get really excited and they're like, oh, we should add this and then this and then this. You're like, okay. But, maybe we should just concentrate on this right now and get this done. And then we can maybe see if we have time for this later on.
Yeah, prioritizing your tasks and knowing like, we have like a giant nice to have list. It's like, all right, when we get to a polish phase at the end, let's go through the list and pick all right, this is reasonable. And everyone's become so aware on the team. They know like what we have time for and what we don't, like team wide. And I think the team's evolved to be like extremely brutal with ourselves. Like usually there was a time where it was like, we're scared to put anything out publicly on the internet. And then usually when we did, the internet was nicer to us than our own team is. Because it's like some meetings, do you guys find like there's a point when a meeting goes past like an hour and a half where it just devolves into either an idea fest where there's no reasonable way you can do all of them, or it gets into like such self-critical analysis of what's going on that it's so hyper-focused on one thing. It's like, all right, it's been an hour and a half, it's getting to that point, let's stop. We'll revisit this topic like another day. We need, because the brain bandwidth is just like
It's all about the priorities of the game and meeting your dates and like, okay, if this animation has to be this long, I can't add double backflips and this and that and this would be cool, but no, it's not what's good for the game.
Right. Yeah, I know when we started, I did this. Do you remember this, Annick? That really long animation I did for the like intro promo for our game. Yeah, it's not even finished. I'm the only animator on our team, so it's like not finished, but it's so pretty. I want to finish it, but there's so many more things to do that just had to be put on the back burner. But I will finish it when I get time because I love it.
Because that's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. But yeah, it's just like unnecessary things that don't need to be in your game, but you can add later, put in later. Like we've even cut a character from our game.
Oh yeah.
Yep, because it's just unnecessary. Just edit the narrative and scope. You have to.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, well, our questions ended a little. I mean, we were going to open it 15 minutes for questions, but it's okay if we do an extra 5. So if you guys have any questions for everyone, feel free to ask. Ron?
Can you talk about collaborating? Brady touched on it a little bit, but can you talk about collaborating with sound and like the other areas where you have to get their feedback coordinated with them because there's a lot of interdependencies there.
Yeah, everyone usually forgets about sound. and they don't get much say. And then when you ask them, their eyes light up, and it's great. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, this." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's great. Like, we can add this here and this here and this here." So working with sound, it could be a little intimidating because, again, they're speaking a different language than you are. So sometimes you have to either pull them back, or I was doing a dance and like, "We gotta match this beat." I'm like, "Okay, I don't know what that means. Just tell me, just give me something that I can match it to." So working with sounds, their input can be really vital to how the end result is gonna turn out.
Yeah, that's another guy or gal that needs to be in your design meetings sometimes, because it's audio. If you play like, after over the years, like talking to our audio engineer, he's like, "Go play any games on mute." And I was like, wow, so much of the feedback is from audio, and so much of game design is completely enhanced by audio. So there were times where, as an art director, I'm focused on visual art, but there's audio art is just as important, really, because there were times where at first it was like, well, just do like generic like impact sounds, do like a swoosh sound for if you miss and a hit sound for if you hit for all the weapons. Okay. And then we got a layer deeper and we realized like people aren't understanding exactly when they're being hit, when other people are being hit. It's like, but we have like these 7 different visual things that happen. And then we decided we're going to do specific impacts for when you get hit, and then generic ones that are lower volume or get tuned out for when other people get hit, and it's more specific and more like visceral to you and what's going on like your viewport.
In my experience, sound has never been a consideration that I was told to think of as I was creating visual assets. It usually tends to be more of a reactive thing, where the sound designer comes in once everything is kind of done, and they are necessary and they enhance everything, but I don't think that sound is very often thought of heavily when designing a game, unless those games are sound-based.
They can make a huge difference, though.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just how it's been in my experience.
Yeah, and the good thing, you want as an audio. Are you an audio engineer? Or you do audio?
No.
Okay.
I'm a producer.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking the question, because I know a lot of times audio guys get put on the back burner.
Yeah.
They're stuck with our mess at the end.
Yeah, because I think it's not a disrespect thing to audio, but I think audio engineers need to be assertive and make sure that they interject when they need to. Like, our sound guy's awesome about that. He sits and he wants to sit in every meeting, even if he's not talking. And then usually he's like, well, what about sound for this? Or we'll be describing a mechanic and he's sitting there taking notes on the mechanic. And then he'll come back and be like, all right, how are we treating sound for this? How are we going to treat music? And then really cool systems come out of it where he's like, all right, we have these different phases of combat. So I want to do like a very relaxed non-combat music, and then when you see an enemy player, even if you're not fighting, then I'm going to bring in percussion, and then at the end when you're actually fighting, it transitions to a battle track, and can we do that? And then the programmer chimes in, yes, it's easy, we can do that. And then it kind of evolves because they're getting involved in those discussions, whereas if it's just design or just art and we're coming up with gameplay, later you're like, oh yeah, wait, we need sound effects on this. But if the audio engineer's getting involved with those discussions, then they can.
In the middle, yeah.
They're like, all right, well, what kind of he gets super detailed. Someone's like, I don't know what you're saying. I don't.
Yeah.
I like the idea. Like,
That's
go
great,
with it.
though.
Sometimes you just got to give creative freedom.
Right.
Let them do their thing.
Because they know what they're doing. As an animator, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sound.
No idea.
Question?
How have you guys in the past, if you had any handle any team members that constantly don't pull their weight?
I love that question.
I mean, I feel like
It's hard.
the 80-20 rule, do you guys feel like that's the case? Maybe not for smaller teams, but it's like 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people is kind of the general rule. I kind of agree with that. And especially for an unfunded indie that's all remote, like, it's really easy for people not to pull their weight. Some of them are like leadership people that have been, with us for 8 years, and you just have to talk to them and be like, look, it's okay to be honest. You don't want to insult them. Like, do your freaking work or you're off the team. You don't want to threaten your team members, especially when it's free. You have to be very careful and to ruffle feathers, but at the same time, you be like, look, there's an expectation here. We're trying to run a professional game project here, and you got to do your work. You got to invest more. It needs to be more of a priority. If it can't be, then let us know, and we'll try to staff up and have like secondary members that are taking some of their responsibilities. But eventually it becomes a dead horse, and they start tuning you out when you're like, dude, I really need these tasks. And then eventually there's a point where you just got to try to replace them. It's unfortunate, but if they're not willing to buy in for the end game, then if you have the financial resources, it's much easier to restaff. But there's a point where, sometimes I'm making forum posts on Polycount and other places looking for those positions, hoping to find somebody that can pull their weight. Or you get, if it's a senior guy, you get juniors to supplement and take the smaller things. But then if you need that senior level work, you just try to figure it out. It's hard. If
you're a person like on the ground level, kind of dealing with that, sometimes you just kind of need to bring it to light, because sometimes the upper management doesn't quite see it and they don't really know what's going on. So sometimes you really do have to speak up, like, hey, look, this is becoming a huge problem and a weight on my shoulders. But yeah, sometimes you actually do have to speak up. Yeah, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, unnecessarily, but sometimes it's important for those people with decision-making powers to understand.
Question right there?
Have you guys, and this is for anybody on the panel, have you had to work with someone who's brand new to the gaming industry and they're not a developer, but they want to make a game? What has your experience been working with like brand new people to the industry?
Mostly that's it. Well, for us, it's mostly artists that we know of, and art schools. Very often, we don't study game for art, art for games. We study art more in general. So a lot of what needs to be learned is just like how important. Again, a lot of what we talked about here actually is like the importance of naming conventions, of communication, of design docs. All those things are usually what's missing when people come right out of college. Like, that's what I was missing, I know for sure, when I started my first job, is like, and also more multidisciplinary skills, understanding exactly what the programmers are doing and what the game designers are doing, and just a larger understanding of how games are made in general.
I think working with people who haven't quite done this before is trying to keep them focused, because they tend to go all over the place. And just kind of try to assimilate them into the team, try to help them learn through the learning curves and working with other people. I know coming right out of school, it's very different and difficult to work with people that it's a different environment. So it's just be patient and try to help them along.
Yeah, and it's good to like lead them along the right path, because practice makes perfect, but practice also makes permanence. And they get bad habits if they're not doing it the proper way, professional way. So it's good to just like not mentor them, but
help them
out. Yeah.
There's kind of you have to consider, like, from a business perspective, when you're bringing people in, you're making a time investment in them. If you have to train someone from scratch, you have to ask yourself, like, is this going to take 2 years for them to get to the point that they can even produce at the quality level? Because you can't bring someone at the ground floor just because you like them, and then you don't get any usable work out of them for a couple of years. So for a project, like mine, I have to have people that are good to go. Maybe they need a little bit of mentorship. They have there's got to be a foundational level of skill there. Mm-hmm. But there's other things too, where like for marketing, for instance, brought in marketers that never did games before. You have to explain the entire industry, and for there it's worth it. But there's still skills for marketing. It's just understanding the industry to tweak those skills for it. Because for the ground floor, if people come in, like, we'll get candidates that send portfolios, or like they're like, I'm just starting to learn. It's like, well, here's the resources you need to build your portfolio up. Here's tutorials and videos that'll help you grow, but we need production ready. So work on your skills, and if you want to still work with us later, like, send in your stuff later, and I'm happy to give feedback or advice anytime, but can't bring you on the team, sorry. Other questions? It's very quiet. Yes.
How do you deal with like bridging the gap? Like when you hand work off to people, it's hardly ever like perfect for what they need.
and you're often given like the option of, well, I could fix this myself, it'll take like 15 minutes to fix that thing, or I could spend like 2 days of emailing it back and trying to get them to do the correct thing for you, and then potentially it would be a payoff in the future. Like, what would be the best way to deal with those situations?
I think the best way is to really compare like how much time it will take you versus how much time it will take you to tell them, because yes, if it will take 10 emails, it would be faster to just spend those 15 minutes doing it. So it depends.
But definitely tell them so they don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to fix it yourself, just make sure that they're aware so they don't continue to do it thinking everything's fine. But then later down the road, you've been fixing this stuff all along, saying, hey, okay, this is not working out.
Yeah, I don't think you should play cleanup too much if you don't have to. It's weighing the options, and if your plate's clean as like the cleanup guy, and you have the time. But yeah, absolutely, you should mention it. You should never like let it sweep it under the rug. Oh, I'll just fix it for them, and then then you're constantly chasing.
They're gonna make the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah, it just becomes part of your job if they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want them to develop. At worst, just give them the resources. Like, hey, this could use some work. Here's some resources or documentation that'll help next time. I'm going to clean this up because we don't have time. But it depends where you're at in production. If you're early in production, then you can probably let them work through the issues. If you're like deep in production, you're trying to hit a deadline or release, then maybe you're less likely to, it depends on the project phase.
We're pretty straightforward with each other on our team. Like if there's something that needs to be fixed, I mean, we wear a lot of hats, so we do, because we're so small, so we do a lot of work for each other. Like me and Annick have been passing the environment around and working on that and doing tweaks and stuff like that. But you just have to be straightforward, and even if things do need to be like delegated around the team, it's just, I don't know, communication between each other. Yeah. Yep.
Sometimes I'm an art student, and I find myself like when I plan final compositions, when I start my workout, I start out with my design, but then when I'm towards the end, getting completed, like my design changes completely, I lose track of my color composition and just where the models are set up, textures and stuff, it just changes. Do you have any advice on how to get back to your original design when you hit that point? Or?
I think it's mostly keep looking at your, like, when you start, make the design docs and keep looking at them and comparing your current work with where you want to go. And if where you want to go has changed, maybe it's worth redoing the design work so you have, you know where you're going with what you're set to do.
Yeah, because your work evolves like as you work on it. You just want to make sure that it's still in your vision of what you wanted to create and not too far off from it. Change can be good. I mean, we've changed some things in our project, and they were for the better. So it really depends on your vision. If it strayed too far, maybe you should pull it back in. There are a lot of different ways you can do that. I mean, I'm trying to think, like if you're doing, is it like 3D based? Is that 3D? I work in 3D a lot for freelance. The only thing I could say is just look at your design docs, look at what you originally had, and see if you want to go back to the original vision or what you're creating now is actually the direction you want to take.
Yeah, I think that it depends. If it's for personal work and it's your own stuff, some iteration's good. Like a lot of times you don't know you're making a mistake until you're like halfway in and you're like, oh wait, if I do it this way now, then it'll turn out better. And for personal stuff, I think that's great.
It's a lot different when you're on a team, though.
Yeah, but when you're working on another project with other people's requirements and designs, if you think you found a better way, sometimes it helps just to ask, like, hey, I've been doing it this way, but I'm hitting some hitches. What do you think if I approach it this way? Sometimes it's like, oh wait, that's way better. Yes, let's go this way. Or sometimes it's like, no, I like where you're going, but we need to stick to the original plan.
Yeah, sometimes the client will want something that you're clearly not, like, this is not a good idea. But that's what they want, and that's what they're paying you for, so that's what you got to do.
When they do that, I usually send 2 versions. One that is
Yeah.
what they ask for, and one is like, but this is what I would do.
And they
with
always
it.
pick the one they
If
ask
time
for.
allows.
No. Actually, they tend to pick the one that I give additionally because they're like, oh yeah, you're right. That wasn't such a good idea. That one looks better. Let's go with it.
Well, also, if you are sending different versions, make sure you don't send anything that you're not happy with, because
Yes.
they will choose the one you're least happy with.
Yes.
100% of the time.
It's worth it to make extras and to not send the ones that you don't like and
Yeah.
only send the ones you like.
Yes, that's important.
And you got to be okay when they kill your babies. It's going to happen.
Clients want the most ridiculous things.
Yeah. Why would you want
I want a
that?
spider robot, but but this is a flower company. Okay, I don't care.
I've seen some pretty crazy things with client work.
Yes.
Estimations. You're getting ready to start working on something, you're trying to figure out how long it's gonna take, and, the programmer or something, whoever you guys touch it out, is waiting on you to get that done. How do you go about estimating it? Do you pad your estimations a little bit, or do you give yourself time for any kind of mistakes that you might have?
Yes, always pad the estimations because everything's gonna take longer than you think it is.
Plus with revisions and people coming in and changing things. Oh, I don't really like this. I want this, but I didn't actually have any more time. But if you have an extra day or so, you're like, yeah, we could do that.
And clients will throw in curveballs too.
Oh, yeah.
From just
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
Let's
Like,
do
you want me to
tomorrow,
add
but-
what? Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I know it's not what we asked for, but we want this instead. Okay, well, you
Completely
can always
different
do new time estimates too. Of course, you got to be careful with that because they can always like, well, this is not what we wanted to pay you for. This is not what we originally agreed on. You have to make it clear, well, if you want this changed, this is what's going to happen. So I guess it's always constantly revisiting and make sure you're staying on track.
One worthwhile thing is especially in freelance, in contracts that you set up to work with them, add in a certain amount of revisions that are included and written in the contract so that after 3, if they're on revision number 4, 5, 10, and they still want you to change things, you can say, look, in the contract it says only 2 revisions, and if you want more, we will have to do a new estimate.
And if they change it completely different, then it's a new contract. It's
Yeah.
not the same thing anymore.
Yeah, I think for like indie projects, non-freelance, it's like twice what they say it's going to take most of the time or more at minimum.
Yeah.
It's so I'll get this to you Tuesday. Usually in my head, I used to expect that, and I'd be frustrated and stressed out all the time because I'm like, it's not here Tuesday. You said Tuesday. Be a man of your word. Honor. But usually now it's just like, yeah, Tuesday. It'll probably be like the next Tuesday. And
Right, yeah.
If that's okay, then it's like, sure, I'll see it the Tuesday after you're saying. But it's also experience. Like, the more experience you get, the easier it gets to estimate. 'Cause you've done so many things. Like, oh yeah, it takes about this time. But usually, it's like what you think it's going to take and add a couple hours as an
Yeah.
estimate, just so you give yourself a more
It's like
room, especially
30% or
freelance,
something.
right?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time just working and timing yourself as you work
Yeah.
to be able to know how fast you work. And even then, it's never a precise
You never
science.
know when you're going to run into problems or what those problems are going to be.
But
Just-
even
yeah.
even when you have agreed upon, okay, I said I was going to deliver this Tuesday, like you said, and I said, okay, I'm going to break this down. I'm going to do this for like 2 hours. This is going to be 3 hours. When those 2 hours are up, I'm moving on. I got to move on because I'm not going to make my deadline if I don't. So just keep track of your time. And someone else is waiting on you.
Right. Question.
When you're working with like remote artists working remotely, how often do you guys have like general meetings? Like, of course, you guys mentioned that it's good to have like emails between you guys for communications. To have like the people that need to know, if something changes, it's good to like include them. But sometimes it's good to have the rest of the team just know in general, when those changes are made. How often do you think like general meetings through Skype would be good for the team, or like how much would be too much meetings?
Our team has a weekly meeting.
And we communicate on Slack pretty
Yeah.
consistently. And if we need to work on something specific, especially if we're collaborating on something specific, like the past several weeks, we've been passing environment back and forth. So we'll generally communicate more and then have more not Slack conversations, but Skype conversations. And those are always really helpful. But I feel like it's better to like actually talk to the person instead of just do text.
And it's important for the whole team to
Yeah.
talk at the same time so that everyone has an idea of what everyone's doing. So
And put in
just
their
scrum
input,
meetings.
yeah.
But yeah, we do weekly 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
I
sometimes
think-
they run over an hour. Sometimes they're shorter.
Yeah.
It depends on the week.
The 1 hour meetings are good, but I've also seen this work and fail. So I guess it depends on which type of project it is. But stand-ups in the morning, just have everybody type it in and send it off before lunch, or so everyone knows what everyone's working on. But again, I've also seen that work and also fail. So I guess it depends on the size of the team and how vital that is to you. But I would say try it out. Always adding a couple more meetings if things are going awry is not a bad thing.
I think that's a good point. Ultimately, every team, what works for a team is going to be specific to that team, and it's worth figuring out what works with.
I mean, even per project.
True.
Yeah, we've done the 1 hour format, but we've changed it a bunch of different times. It started as like a general announcements thing, and then like sort of discussed designy things and feedback, and then it went into stand up, and the time was anywhere from like an hour and a half to 3 hours sometimes. Then that's when we started time boxing. An hour and a half, we end the meeting no matter what's going on. Then we put stand up first, like, all right, it's time box, 30 minutes stand up. It holds all the artists accountable. If an artist doesn't show work, then they look bad to everyone. It's like an accountability mechanism. And then one-on-ones for specific artists, usually when they start a new task. I'm doing environment art, but if I have a junior doing some environment art, it's like, here's your base textures, here's like your style guidelines for it, and like how it needs to be executed. And then if they need like development or more mentoring, then it happens in that instead of the general, and that's just per need. But I try to do like the least amount possible meetings wise. I'm not a meetings guy. I want people doing stuff.
Yeah.
If a meeting is going over, and it's just like, say, the programmers are discussing an issue, you don't need to keep the artist there. So just say, okay, we're going to close this down for now. We're going to open another one for just
We've done that a lot.
the
too.
programmers or whoever, the artists.
And
whoever needs
sometimes
to
we'll be
there.
so busy that we're just like, let's not do the meeting. Let's just
Yeah.
work through it. But we'll all be working at the same time and communicating through Slack. So
Yeah.
there's still communication there.
Not very often, though. We usually do.
We usually
have
do the meeting,
meetings.
but there has been times, like this past week, I didn't meet because we're preparing, and then it's just been, Molly especially, she's been like setting all this and doing a million things, so we missed the meeting this week. So.
Molly's the CEO.
Yeah, Molly's our CEO. Molly Prophet. We have a few more questions, or a few more minutes for questions, but we're coming into the close of our panel. So if you guys have any quick questions, you can shoot them off. Anybody? All right. Oh, one back there?
So when you see a job announcement that says need 2 years experience, apply anyway.
Apply
Like
anyway.
it,
Yeah, apply.
it's just a way it scares a lot of people. Of course, they would prefer someone with experience, but if you have been drawing for 2 years, that can't count it in some way as 2 years experience. But another thing that's really useful and counts as experience is working on projects. For example, Matt Canei worked on Hanako while he was a student, and you got a job out of it, right?
Yeah,
So that's experience too, just student
it's
projects.
definitely experience.
Yeah.
It
Well,
counts.
even tailoring your specific demo reel, even if it's a small couple of pieces or whatever, will be better. Say we're a slot machine company, so if we see someone who has After Effects, blingy, the kind of stuff we do every day, we're gonna look at them more seriously, even if they don't have all the experience that we'd want, more than someone who has something completely different, game art that's not even close to what we do.
Yeah, your projects that are in portfolio count more than your resume. So as long as you have stuff that looks good on your website, they're gonna look at it and be like, "That's experience."
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
been some students that I've met that were sophomores, and their work was so good they got hired at like Cliffy B's new studio because they're extremely talented people, and you're only as good as your worst piece. So it's like only showing your best work, and you're constantly leapfrogging your own portfolio, and you're always building that, and you should. But I think there's nothing to lose by applying, but it's also look up artists on LinkedIn that work at studios that you want to work for. Try to find junior level people, look at their portfolios online, see what their work quality is, and try to match their quality or exceed their quality. And if you're not quite there yet, then message those guys, ask them for portfolio reviews, ask them what can I do to get to your level. Most of them are really happy to help or give you advice, but these tutorials will help, and eventually you'll notice your portfolio, now it's ready.
Yeah.
You're seeing like the junior guy from Blizzard, now my work looks like his, now I can maybe get hired here.
Plus, you'll make friends that way.
Yeah.
Right. I'd be super flattered if someone emails me like, "Oh, I love this one piece you did in your demo reel. How'd you do it?"
That, and I think there's a sense
God.
of community amongst artists and kinship, just because we've all
We love showing off.
we only got where we are out of hard work, and we empathize with other people who are also working hard.
And coming to events like this is great too. I mean, networking is important,
Yeah.
making friends in the industry, just getting yourself out there. So you're already doing good.
Yeah. I mean, be willing to do the work too. A lot
Yes.
of there's been a lot
Yes.
of portfolio reviews here where I see the student a year later and their portfolio is exactly unchanged, and I'm like, why are
Right.
you still?
Yeah.
Why haven't this changed? And there's some, the next day they send me like their whole portfolio is reworked with the advice I gave them. I'm like, whoa.
Right.
And that's
So
the
they're
one that got
dedicated.
hired.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that get in because they have the
They want
initiative.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They want
just
it.
from following the advice and letting people know, look, I followed your advice. People are gonna feel like, oh, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
They took me seriously.
But also, don't be annoying and overbearing.
Don't go to their home address. Like,
Don't do
show up
that.
at their house.
What about this? What
Don't talk anymore.
Notice me, senpai.
But yeah, okay. Well, we're at 12:30, so at the end of the panel, thank you guys for showing up.
Thanks
and,
for coming.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks
guys.
you to our awesome speakers.